Here.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness.
Here.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Sperry.
Here.
Councilmember Curtis.
Present.
Councilmember Herbig.
Here.
Councilmember Danuski.
Here.
Thank you.
If you would please stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and if there is no objection, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda is a presentation, and Debbie Blessington is our new building and code inspector, and I guess Brian, you're going to do the honors here?
Quick, brief honors, but yeah, good evening, Council, Mayor.
This nice lady deserves more than that.
Right, she does.
You don't know that yet.
Well, you're doing a job for us, and we appreciate it.
This is Debbie Blessington, our Code Enforcement Officer and Building Inspector. She's been with us for a couple weeks now, and we have the privilege of having her on board. She comes over from Bothell, where she has been working for about 10 years now. And so I was going to give her an opportunity to say a couple words to you. I think she wanted to.
Wonderful.
Good evening. Just introduce myself, and hopefully I'll get a chance to meet each of you and get to know you a little better so that we're more than faces. Obviously, I'm a Seahawks fan. And Dr. Van Ness, you were my orthodontist when I was a kid. Oh. So, very nice.
Be careful there, Alan. Be careful.
What was your maiden name?
Walsh.
Walsh, there we go. Okay.
No. My parents were Ruth and Richard Walsh.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything you want to know?
No, but we really appreciate you showing the Seahawks spirit here when they're playing tonight.
Actually, as soon as we're done. You know, no disrespect.
So what can we do to extend this a little while?
I watched, and when I left, it was 21-17 Hawks, and so I've got my sisters.
Wait a minute. I was listening, and it was 3-0 with about 5-6 minutes to go before the half. What happened?
That's a different game. Yeah,
no, it was the Seahawks.
Game.
It was on the radio.
No.
Okay.
All right. Well, then, are we done?
Yes,
Just
we're
kidding.
done. Thank you.
All right. You guys
Thank
have
you
a good
very
evening.
much.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you. Next item then is power reliability report from Exponent Engineering. Ms. Ousley, our Assistant City Manager.
This always happens to me. The chair is either too low or too high. Mayor and Council, good evening. And it's always nice to be following another Packer fan. Actually, Debbie told me that next to the Seahawks, the Packers are her favorite team. And as you know, my spouse and I own one share of the Packers.
There you go.
But it cost almost twice as much to frame that stock certificate as the price of the share.
Did you get rights to season passes with that?
Oh, no. But we're here tonight to allow our consultants from Exponent Engineering to summarize the report that they have prepared on energy reliability. And we thank the council for being supportive of us going forward in contracting with Exponent because I think we all felt like it was very important for us to have independent technical advice as we prepare to embark on franchise negotiations with Puget Sound Energy. And we heard about Exponent because of their work with the city of Bellevue, 2 or 3 years ago?
2012.
Yeah. When Bellevue was in kind of a similar situation and wanted independent advice about the capacity for PSE to serve a growing downtown and other business areas, as well as reliability issues. So they have been hard at work for the last several months, and their report is, as you know, online for anyone in the community who wants to read through it, but they will be summarizing their recommendations as they go through the presentation. So I'd like to introduce Walter Bach to my immediate right and Stig Nielsen, and they have been working with us for the last few months. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. We will run through a summary of our report, and we can either take questions during the presentation or at the end, whatever is the protocol up here, so that will be fine. So the purpose of the report was to really take a look at the reliability of the electric system in Kenmore, to look at the physical system, to look at programs and projects going on, to look at the performance of the system, and to make recommendations on that. Just my 30-second speech on Exponent. We're about a 1,000-person engineering and science company. We have offices throughout the United States and a few overseas, and we are about 700 to 800 technical consultants, which are people that get involved with our technical and scientific work, and then we have about 150 support staff. And we support the majority of engineering and scientific practices that you can encounter. We have a local office up here. We have an office in the city of Bellevue, down off of Highway 90 in the Eastgate area. I am from our Oakland, California office, and Stig is associated with our Phoenix office. A little bit on the electric system, just to get everybody up to speed and to define definitions. When we talk about the electric system, we're talking from generation, where we generate the power, and that can be power that can be owned by the utility or purchased by the utility through purchase agreements. So the way that the utility industry has evolved, most utilities do not have their 100% of the generation to meet their demand. They have some percent, and then they have contracts for the rest. And that's true of PSE. The second major part of the system is the transmission lines. This is the bulk power system that goes from the generation over to distribution. It's generally very redundant, and if a line goes down, you have the ability to move power through other lines. So typically that's a pretty robust part of the system. And then finally you have the distribution system, where it comes to substations, goes to distribution lines, goes to the end user customers. And so when we talk about reliability, the majority of the reliability issues are going to be on the distribution system. If you have a large outage that affects a generation station or a transmission line, then it's a big region-wide outage. But the majority of issues that we talk about in reliability are really on that distribution and customer side. So that's primarily where you'll be seeing us speak this evening. The objectives we had for this program, as put forth by the city, was to look at the infrastructure and reliability within Kenmore, to take a look at complaints to the UTC and what we could see in the public sector, to look at ongoing capital programs and maintenance programs that could improve reliability in Kenmore, and to recommend approaches that can be taken. We also looked at current maintenance practice and vegetation management practices, as these are key components. And then we looked at, on the generation and transmission side, we looked at how that infrastructure may impact capacity and demand in the future here. And then we also took a look at what are some smart grid type strategies that might be applicable to improve service in the area. So that was the objectives of the project. The work that we did included review of publicly available information from the WTC through PSE, through Kenmore, and through other publicly available means. We reviewed the integrated resource plan. That's a 20-year look ahead at the major status of PSE system from generation transmission perspective. We did a drive and walk through of various circuits in the city. We spoke with some individuals at the city here, as well as general manager at Baster University, as well as some of the local residents. We were fortunate enough to be invited to a community meeting out here during the course of this project. And then we obviously were able to meet with PSE and talk to members of their distribution and planning staff to see what they had in the works for the city, and then any other industry available information. So that's kind of the scope and the information we looked at. Does anybody have any questions on that before we go? Okay. First thing that, since we're going to be talking reliability, I wanted to talk about what affects reliability. And there's three types of interruptions that we see in a system. One's called a momentary interruption. For the state of Washington, that's an interruption that'll last less than 1 minute. Momentary interruptions are not included in any of the reliability metrics reported to the state. Other states use a much larger number. States will use 3 minutes, 5 minutes, but state of Washington is 1 minute. Sustained interruptions, these are the ones that are critical to you. These are outage durations longer than a minute. And these are outages that can occur during normal operation, during storms. It's considered a sustained outage. Occasionally, you have a major interruption that meets certain criteria. It takes out 5% of the system. It's a major regional storm event. These types of events affect a large percentage of end users, and they get categorized as major interruptions because they may or may not be included in reliability metrics. So they're the types of outages. So what we'll be speaking mostly of here is sustained and major outages. There's two key metrics that are used to measure reliability and compare performance with various parts of the system and various other companies. One is the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, and this is really a measure of the number of outages the average customer would see. So if there's 20,000 customers in Kenmore, and if the safety value was 1, that means on average every customer saw 1 outage per year. Now it's not going to be like that. Some are going to see 3, some are going to see 0, but it's the average customer, what the average customer would see. The second one is the System Average Interruption Duration. This is the duration of outage that an average customer would see, and it's measured in minutes. So if it was 100 minutes in a year, then the average customer would be out of power 100 minutes. Again, it doesn't work that way. Somebody could be out 1,000, somebody could be out 0. So it's just an average number, but it gives you a good measure of how your system's performing. If we look at Kenmore and what's impacting the distribution system, number one, it's a very old system. It's kind of a legacy system before you started to incorporate the area. So it's got a lot of aging issues with it. It also has a lot of location issues with it. Because it was developed at a time before incorporation. You have circuits that are very difficult to get to. They're very small easements. There's one circuit where we understand the basically right-of-way for the utilities 5 feet. There's a lot of tall trees here, so you're susceptible to tree-related damage and outages during major storms. Because it's an old equipment, you're going to be subject to equipment-type issues. So when you look at the city of Kenmore, it's an old system. It's vulnerable to tree damage, which is part of the beauty of the town, but it also makes you vulnerable to outages, and especially in major storms. So that's kind of really the nutshell. It's not the ideal system for the city today, the way the city wants to operate today. If you look at some of the results, and I'll point you to the bottom left, the figure on the bottom left. PSC reports a lot of information. They have an annual report to the WTC. They actually put a fair amount of information in there. Not that you can get down to a city level necessarily, but there's a lot of information, and information is available to cities by request. But in the bottom right, there's 10 circuits that serve the city of Kenmore. And this is a list reflective of where the circuits fare relative to their reliability. So if there was one at 100%, that would be the top, most reliable circuit in the PSC system. PSC has around 1,100 circuits in their system. If you have 10%, that means you're in the bottom 10%. You're the 10% least reliable circuits. If you look at the city of Kenmore, 7 of the 10 circuits are in the bottom quartile, and 9 of the 10 are below the midpoint. So obviously the circuit performance and the reliability performance here isn't where you want it to be, and isn't where it isn't even hitting the average of the PSC system. So performance obviously lags PSC's overall system performance. The performance is generally driven, as we said, by older distribution assets, heavily wooded areas, vulnerable to trees and storms. The location of some of these circuits is not ideal. So when we're looking at reliability, we need to find a fault first. Once we find it, we can take action. So we have finding the faults, taking action to prevent duration, and then to prevent the faults. So that's one of the issues, is that you have a system that's not ideal for operation and handling outages. And after storms, utilities prioritize outage restorations, and obviously it goes by transmission assets first, then it goes by critical facilities. Community like Kenmore doesn't really have a lot of critical facilities. There's not hospital facilities, emergency facilities, so therefore it's not going to be high up the prioritization list in a major storm. This is a couple of benchmarks for you. State of Washington has 3 regulated utilities. Avista out in the west, Pacific Corp has Washington assets, and then PSE. And then we also threw in Seattle City Light, since they published their, while not required, they published some reliability statistics. And generally, PSE does reasonably well on a number of outages that occur. They tend to be high when it comes to the duration of outage, and means the response time's not as favorable as other. If you look at Seattle City Light, which is a city which has a lot of benefits and reliability, it tends to have lesser outages, and certainly it's able to handle the duration and the outage restoration more efficiently. The figures here I've shown you exclude major storm events. Most benchmarks are done without major storms, and that's what we show here. With major storms in there, the city of Kenmore's results just get worse compared to the system average.
Makes sense, it would be.
Relative to PSE versus Kenmore. This is intended to show where Kenmore shows up. As you can see, Kenmore's in the red. Usually the number of outages, or this is a PSE, I'm sorry, this is a PSE system. With major storms, you can see that the red is major storms and all outages, significantly higher duration, significantly higher frequency. So you can see what the impact of this is as a system as a whole. Since Kenmore has a more difficult environment, it gets worse for Kenmore than the system as a whole. One thing I should point out when looking at PSE's service quality metrics, our work, we tend to look at things on an annual basis. We want to see how it progresses. It gives us an even look. Their service index for number of outages is based on an annual number of outages, so an annual safety value. Their duration is based on a 5-year rolling average of all outages. So it's done a little bit different. That tends to smooth out the impact of outages from year to year. However, they do report on all these bases in their annual report. There's also issues around transmission system, although those impacts are less. Stig, if you want to chime in here.
Yes, thank you, Walt. The transmission system feeding City of Kenmore is fairly robust because you have about 5 substations feeding the city. Each one of these substations have at least 215 kV lines coming into them. So it means that if you lose one line, no problem. If you lose 2 lines, you have a problem. It's called N-1, that is, you can take any one single contingency, but you cannot take 2. So I think that's what is shown here in this graph. And you had an outage maybe a month, 6 weeks ago, when you had a major blackout of the city. And the reason was that PSE had construction activity on one line, so that was out of service. And then there was something happening to the VIII line and took out the city. So that just shows that it can happen, but it's fairly unusual, except maybe major storms, when a tree can actually take out the line in a number of places. You had one of those incidents in 2006, when even the 230 kV lines, 500 kV lines coming in from Bonneville were out. And that's a problem. Nothing can be done inside the city to fix that. Next.
Do you want to say anything about the East Side project?
No, well, okay, good point. Walt points out that the East Side project that is going on or being planned, that actually has strengthening of the system between Bellevue South, will not have any negative impact on the city. If it is built, it may improve the robustness of the transmission system. So there is a slight positive upside to it. And I think that's all I would like to say on that. Now, somebody said the future is much like today, only longer. And this shows the situation on the power supply side for PSE. And you can see that there is one blue line and one red line. The blue line is forecast of what the peak power load will be, assuming that the distribution resource effort can reduce the peak power. This is putting in more efficient light bulbs, putting in insulation, doing efficiency improvements, reducing the peak power. Also, having the ability to shut off major power producers if you get in a jam, a power power loads if you get in a jam. But there's still a fairly significant gap between what is available for the next 20 years and what expected demand is going to be. You can see that's about 1,000 megawatts at 2035 that has to be made up. And that includes being able to get the distribution resources reduced by efficiency improvements, etc. If you can't reach that, then we have about a 2,000 megawatt gap. Now, there's time to fix that because you have 20 years, you should be able to build power plants, you should be able to negotiate power purchase agreements. Note that the 870 megawatts of wind power doesn't count for very much on this because you may have the peak power when there's no wind. So only about 9 or 10% of that 870 megawatts of wind can be counted on when you have the peak load. When it's really cold, you don't have much wind. So, yes, the future doesn't really look like that great, but I think that PSC is aware of it and can bridge the gap. The next.
Okay, the next thing we took a look at was specific projects that would benefit the Kenmore area. There's been a couple that have been recently completed. There was an underground circuit installed at Baystar University, and our understanding there is they've seen a pretty favorable improvement. There was underground circuit installed along northeast portions of Northeast Bothell Way. Obviously, that would be beneficial. And then there's recently been the upgrade of the Vituli to Moreland's 115 kV line. There's projects that are in the planning stages by PSE that are specific reliability enhancements in the city to address recently identified problems. There have been reclosers installed in the city, and what a recloser does, it allows the recloser to see a fault. If the fault goes away, it can re-energize the line automatically, which essentially prevents a long outage or a sustained outage. There's recloser installations that have been installed, and there are some that are going into installation in the next year. There are overhead switches that will be installed along 185th Street for improved sectionalizing. One of the good things is out of these circuits, these are loop circuits, which means typically they're fed from one end and they serve the entire loop. If there's an outage, then the entire circuit goes out. If you sectionalize the lines such that you can just isolate the portion with the fault, you can actually feed the loop from both sides, so which would reduce the number of customers seeing a long outage and reduce the durations, only focus on a smaller level. So these switch installations are a major benefit to the existing infrastructure. There's some further planned undergrounding along Northeast Bothell Way that's in the planning stages. And then there's some circuit replacements. So on Kenmore 26, which is a problem circuit, PSE has indicated that they are going to reroute and reconductor that portion of the circuit. The benefits of that are right now that's a very inaccessible circuit. If there's a fault in that part of the line, it takes them a long time to find the fault. It takes them a long time to restore the fault. If they move that circuit out into a street right away, it's more visible, it's easier to be addressed. It should clearly reduce outage durations. If they put the tree wire in there, it should also help reduce incidental tree impacts with the line. There's two other projects. There's a reconductoring project associated with Kenmore 27 and then Kenmore 23. And again, our understanding of these projects is they're reconductoring it with more robust conductor, the tree wire that, again, will reduce the number of outages and hopefully improve reliability on those sections. And all of these are ongoing things that PSE does system-wide, and they will all have a beneficial impact if they're done here in Kenmore. Just to get to the recommendations, it's clear that performance in the city is not very good. So implementing the current PSC programs on some of these circuits is really a key. If these circuits plans move ahead for Kenmore 26, 27, and 23, that'll be positive. They should be looking at improving circuits with reliability issues on some of the other lines. The more rapid installation of reclosers and switches will also have a positive effect on the distribution reliability. Kenmore can also work with PSC to pilot some other newer technologies that have not yet been deployed around the system. One of the other things that we noted is you're on a 4-year tree trimming cycle. That's the current cycle for distribution tree trimming. That's probably not sufficient here. You need more frequent patrols to look for problems and to identify problems in advance that occur between the 4-year cycles. And hopefully by increased patrol, you'll pick up problems before they happen. You should also request that PSC provides you with a reliability report. They have the ability to give you a lot of data to understand what's going on in the circuits in your system. If you can get that information on an annual basis, it performs a good basis for you to have a discussion with PSC on what kinds of improvements are needed, what kind of projects are needed. And then the other thing we picked up is that there's not a real formal protocol for the city communicating with PSC relative to new growth or new capacity needs. So it's a very good idea to maybe establish some protocol that when you want to grow parts of the city, that it's in their growth model and they're already planning for it before the need shows up. I think those last two administrative items allow you to keep an eye on what's going on and have a say in how the system performs. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions people may have.
Councilmember Smith.
Thanks for your report, and I appreciate the fact that I know in the report you covered in the recommendations a lot of the concerns that we had. I have a question about number 5. I don't think it's number 5 on your recommendation list, but it's number 5 in our report here, and it has to do with the reliability and the information that we're given from PSC. And when PSC came out, they were not very forthcoming about what the reliability was and where we lagged behind. And it wasn't until we dug deeper and we got more information, and I've got information from one of their engineers and stuff, that all of a sudden it started to become a little more apparent that they were telling us what we already knew, but we didn't have the information up front. And so other than SAIDI and SAFE and these reports for the metrics on that, what else would you recommend that the city pursue to know that we're getting consistently reliable data?
So PSC actually tracks a lot of information. So one of the things you can do, you can get circuit level reliability information. You can also get outages. You could get a list of outages that happen on these 10 circuits. It'll give you information by day, number of customers impacted, number of duration, and the cause. What's the cause? Is it always vegetation management on this circuit? Is it equipment failure somewhere? Is it bird and animal infestation? So you can get the specific outage information, and that lets you kind of take an independent look at what's happening on these circuits and what's driving the performance. You can also ask for the circuits that are not performing well, what kind of activities do they have in mind? Is it taking ongoing programs and doing them at a faster pace? Is it specific projects that are needed to improve a reliability? So you can get that kind of information from them, and it'll help you in your discussions. Are they doing the right things? Are they doing it timely? It'll allow you to do that. They provide that information in their annual report for the 50 lowest performing circuits around their system. They typically talk about what the results is and what actions are being taken. Kenmore, unfortunately, doesn't fall in that bottom 50 very often. That's the roughly 5%, but you're right above it. So that kind of information will allow you to keep track on how things, are they improving, getting worse, and what are some of the issues that you're facing.
So, and I know my colleagues have questions, but just to follow up on that, So if you're not in the bottom 5 percentile, is there no public information available as far as what is being done? I mean, when we have 9 out of 10 that are 40 percentile or lower, how do we know what those improvements are other than PSE giving us that information?
So you'll have to get that from PSE. I think by what the UTC requests, they're responsible for identifying the bottom 50. And a circuit here shows up once in a while, but not very often.
Okay.
So you have to request that information from them.
And if we request it, do they have to give it to us?
I'm guessing they probably would.
But it could be, so it's not, they're not compelled by regulatory agencies, but if we had that in our franchise agreement, then we could,
Right,
that would be a
right,
reasonable
right.
thing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not aware that the UTC requires that for all locales.
Okay.
Councilmember Danuski.
Thank you for doing your report. It's nice to have an independent report confirm what we know. In the outage reporting that you mentioned that we could get from them, do they have something like that shows the exact location so we could say, oh, maybe it's all of the Circuit 26 outages happen in this one little section of the circuit? Do they go down to that nitty-gritty of a level, or is it more just on a circuit wide?
No, it's typically on a circuit level that I've seen. That doesn't mean that they're not going to know that. So it's something you could ask for.
Okay, because that could be an interesting graph to look at or a map to look at. Thanks.
Typically, they have to, utility has to track where the outages occur and all. And they have upgraded their outage management system, so my guess is in the years moving forward, that information should be more available and more accurate.
Thank you.
Councilmember Herbig.
I'm not sure if this is a question for the consultants or for the assistant city manager, but there's a lot of good recommendations here and steps that PSE could take to improve reliability in the city. How do we ensure that they actually move forward with these recommendations? Is this something we, excuse me, is this something we fold into the franchise agreement? Is this put somewhere else? And long term, to ensure that we get these improvements for our citizens, have other cities ever put in penalties for failure to perform, for crossing a certain threshold of outages or minutes per customer? Has anybody ever put in kind of some teeth to kind of ensure performance?
So I am not aware that that's in the UTC's purview, but I'm not going to claim to be the expert in that. But I'm guessing when the UTC looks at PSE, they look at how they're handling the system as a whole. Are they being equitable around the system? And this may not be equitable. So I don't know the answer to that. It's something we'd have to look up. But
And if I could add, the City of Bellevue's franchise agreement has accompanying memoranda of understandings that cover some of these types of issues that we're obviously taking a look at that approach to stuff that you can't necessarily by law have or require being in the agreement itself, but it's spelled out that within X number of days an MOU would be executed. So there are approaches that we can take on that.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Councilmember Smith.
Okay, I have another question. With regards to the smart technologies, can you tell me because you clearly work in this field, that is there, based on how our system is set up currently and with the improvements that we're undergoing, are there specific technologies or products that you see that look like they are a perfect fit or a strong fit for what kind of system we have right now?
Let me address that, because smart technology typically means that you have more data coming from the system. So if you have a fault someplace on the line, you have a piece of equipment called reclosures, probably, that can collect the data, send it to the operators or some engineers at the utility that can give you information about how far away from this particular spot the fault is. So it requires a lot of communication, a lot of data collection from that particular location to come up with that decision. Once you have that decision, you can open switches, you can reclose, you can isolate the faulted area. So that would be the smart technology that could be applied. And PSC is evaluating those kinds of systems, but they are not that readily available yet. So it's more of a trying them out, evaluating them. But I think that in the near future it should be possible to get it to work.
So is there, in adding the reclosers and they're upgrading the circuits, some of the circuits, can some of that technology be implemented at that time? Is that a reasonable time, or do they have to go through a whole new data collection after the...
No, the data is actually acquired or contained in the reclosures if you have an up-to-date modern reclosure.
Okay.
What you need to have is either a fiber link, a radio link, or some way to get the data from the particular location over to the utility where it can be evaluated, unless the device itself can be programmed to be smart enough to at least do some things. Right now, they are already programmed so you can reclose, see is the fault gone. Because if it was a squirrel, then it may have fallen off, and therefore when you reclose, the fault is gone. If it's a tree branch resting on the line, then it probably is permanent. And then you can, as we said in our recommendation, you can open the circuit from the source, open the circuit from a place that's beyond the fault, and with investments, maybe re-energize the circuit from the other end. And in that way, you have narrowed the piece that actually is out of power. So that will be beneficial for many, not the people who are close to the fault, but at least most people will be back.
Okay.
That's what we have in the recommendation, that should be considered.
Okay, thank you. And then one last comment or question. On the major storm outages, do all of the utility districts use the same criteria for analyzing? And you had a graph earlier, and I know it's in our agenda package too, about comparing it to the other utilities. I'm just curious to know if how they quantify the major storm outages the same. And one of the reasons I ask is because it seems like if you actually had a lower threshold for preventive maintenance, then you potentially could have more, it could give the perception that it's a major outage when it's really not.
So for the state of Washington, for the 3 regulated utilities, they actually report on both, and they have to be allowed to. There is a criteria for when you consider it a major storm, but my understanding is the utilities have to petition the WUTC to allow them to take it out of their numbers. So that service quality index they have for duration, it's a 5-year average, all outages considered. So nothing's taken out of it unless they petition the UTC that, hey, we'd like to remove this from the numbers because this was a monumental, once in a 100-year storm or something. But they still report the information. If you go into their annual report, they report the information on all outages, on outages excluding major storms by 5% customers out, outages excluding major storms by the IEEE methodology, which is a little bit different method. So they're pretty good about reporting that kind of information so you can look at it. It's only in there on a system basis. I mean, it's not really in there so you can study Kenmore, but it's obviously the information gets built up from circuit information. So it's definitely included.
Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I'm lucky enough to live on Circuit 26. Are they talking anything about the time when that circuit might be replaced?
So I believe that is scheduled to start next year and would finish up in 2018, I guess, design. But I know they've been in further discussions with the city about moving some of these projects along. But it's my understanding it's a project that's been approved and will start next year.
Thank you.
Any others? So, looking at the report, there's a number of places where you're mentioning Seattle City Light. And I believe that's one of the options that we have looked at in the past. Are there any advantages? I see the rate is, looking at the rates and what you had said, I think you were indicating that we were higher than, PSE was higher than Seattle City Light, but lower than the Snohomish Public Utility District?
I think it's the opposite.
Opposite,
Yeah, Seattle City Light right now has, for typical residents, has higher rates than PSE.
Okay.
The rates are more complex. For instance, City Light has, I think, about 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour for 16 kilowatt hours per month, and then it goes up to 12.6 cents a kilowatt hour. And PSE has somewhere around 9.8 cents for the first 600 kilowatts, I think it was, kilowatt hours, and then it goes up to 11.6. Snohomish has only published for 1,000 kilowatt hours per month on the order of just around 10 cents, maybe slightly less. So it's not a complete apples-to-apples comparison.
Now, Seattle City Light also has, what, a 115 kV line, or capable of bringing that in from the Bothell area?
I think they own the Bothell substation, if I remember correctly, and I think they have 230 and 115 kV lines, but I'm not really, I haven't studied their system in detail.
Okay. And I'm looking at the one that comes into the Kenmore station there from the west, I believe it would be.
Well, Kenmore
that's coming from where?
Kenmore substation is, the Kenmore is fed from the Sammamish substation, which is somewhere south of here, I think south of Bellevue, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And that feeds the entire 115 kV system that feeds Kenmore. So it's not connected to City Light.
Okay. I guess that was my question. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Thank you.
I would just like to make a couple of comments in closing, other than thanking Exponent for their work on this report, but to reiterate how important this is, that Kenmore have reliable power service. We have heard from literally hundreds of residents and businesses when we sent out an email to let people know about the open house tonight and the fact that the report would be presented tonight. Not only did we send it to our general listserv and get the word out in that way, but I asked the staff in our office to help me compile just an email distribution list, and it was literally hundreds of people who I have personally heard from over the last year or so. And so I think we all agree that the current situation is unacceptable. We are leaving no stone unturned, literally, in making sure that our residents, our businesses, have more reliable power. And as you know, Rob Carlinzi was able to meet with PSE leadership in September. The mayor and I were on our way to a Parks Commission meeting out of town, or we would have been there too. But the message to leadership was really strong. As you heard in the report, ongoing discussions are happening even since Exponent's meetings with PSE. So we have asked them to report to the council in December about their capital plans, and so we're hoping that they will have more to say about some of the planned improvements that they intend to go forward with. So, with that, we, talking again just with people at the open house tonight, and knowing how many people are on the Facebook page for Kenmore power outages, it's a high priority for us, and we look forward to working with the council as we go forward to having a very robust franchise agreement.
Thank you. And I also want to say that we really appreciate this report. I think this is the first time we've had this much information and this level of understanding, and I'm very appreciative of the information you've presented and the quality and the ease of understanding. With the exception of the frequency index and the duration index, it was really good and very easy to understand, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Nancy.
Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you in the city, and we ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes out of respect for others. And will the clerk please call the first person?
There's no one signed up.
No one signed up. Mr. Leek, would you like to be heard? And if you will please sign in afterwards.
Good evening, Bill Leek, 15102 64th Court Northeast in Kenmore. I didn't really anticipate speaking tonight, but with regard to the presentation, it was, I think, a good one. I would encourage council to, as you head on into the future with this problem, lay out some easily understood benchmarks and challenge PSE to keep you updated in a fashion that would put it before the public online. I know you have at least one engineer on the board here, and a few others of you who have some science behind you. So thank you for your work, and keep it going.
Thank you, Mr. Leek.
I have one other comment. This is really serious, not just for the people that live here, but it could be very negatively impactful to our economic development should it get out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Leek. Anybody else? And that's fine. We're happy to hear you, but please just go and sign up after you're finished. No. Come on up. You can speak, yes. But make sure you go sign up afterwards.
We will.
Thank you.
My name is Myron Berg, and I live in, actually live in Lake Forest Park, but I'm one of the unfortunate people to be served by Circuit 26. There was some spillover along the way, and my wife and I...
Can we get your address, please?
5461 Northeast 200th Place, Lake Forest Park, 98155.
Thank you.
We've lived here in what my children call Mordor for the past 44 years, raised our family here, and I need to tell you, the thing, ever since PSE took over Puget Power was okay. They did pretty well. In 2008 or 2009, when they took over, things started to deteriorate very quickly. And we have more outages for no good reason except for a squirrel passing gas on a power line, so to speak, or more. But it happens frequently, and I don't mind when the power goes out, but I don't want it to go out for 3 days at a time. You can just count on the fact that if our power goes out, we're the first out and the last on. And that's been going on for ever since they took over. I contacted the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission to file a complaint several months ago. I met with pretty much a deaf ear. They said that how did they put? I wrote it down here. Out of frustration, I did that. I received a song and dance routine that they could not go after PSE until they failed to perform as promised. Well, what have they promised? And then they failed ever since they've taken over. Anyway, they're not doing the job. I called City Light. My next door neighbor and everybody else on our block is on City Light. So there's 6 of us in this little cabal that are served by PSE. And every time the power goes out, I look next door, and power's on, we're cold, our food's rotting, and everybody's up the street is happy. It just goes on and on and on. We've got, basically we're a captive audience. You know, we're being held hostage as far as I'm concerned. You've got nowhere to turn except I'm grateful and thankful that you folks are taking a real active role in trying to get this thing squared away, because it sure does need to be squared away. I read the report online prior to this, and I've spoken to Nancy a couple of times, both on the phone and by email, and I'm very grateful for her as well. I read the report from this company in advance of this meeting, and there are 3 basic things, in my opinion, which can be, we have long-range plans are all well and good, and that's your folks' job to take care of that type of thing. But as far as I'm concerned, I live here in the here and now, and I would like some immediate relief. And based on the results of the report, animals are causing a problem, vegetation is causing a problem, and the structural upgrades are causing a problem. So what I suggest, my recommendations are for PSE to immediately install animal guards at every vulnerable equipment location. That's number 1. This is an interim measure until they can get their ducks in a row. Number 2, vegetation control every 4 years is a joke. It should be about every 4 months or every 4 weeks. Or ongoing day in and day out. And I don't know how much territory they have to cover. And most importantly, to provide Circuit 26, the Mordor people, a rapid response team dedicated solely to fixing the power outages for Circuit 26 immediately after the power goes out. So we have, it's such a mess right now that's, we can sit here for the next 20 years trying to figure out whether they're going to do this or going to do that. Get her done right now. These are 3 easy fixes if they want to spend the money to get it done. But I doubt that they will. But that's a negotiating tool which I hope you folks will use, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. Anybody else? Yes. Mr. Berg, if you'd please go over to the clerk and sign in.
Ashley Guberman, 6416 Northeast 188th Street, Kenmore. We have had 5 outages so far this year. One of the consultants, I believe you said, the future does not look good, but PSE is aware of this, and I believe they can bridge the gap. The question I'd like for follow-up is, what leads you to believe they will bridge that gap when we have been the lowest performing circuit so far? What would prompt the change in PSE's treatment of this circuit? So I appreciate the optimism. I'm missing the grounding for that optimism. Question I'd like looked into is there is an iPhone mobile application called My PSE where anybody can report their outages and it knows where they are. So the question is, if the council or whatever, public outreach were to encourage more people to adopt using this app, and when there's an outage, say, it's out, it's out, it's out, I would think then just by using that data, they can triangulate exactly where it is. I don't know if that's true or not. I would encourage the council to find out if that's a possibility. The main reason being it allows you the opportunity of putting some responsibility for data gathering and more efficient efforts on PSE in the hands of the consumers by knowing that their reporting is not just griping but may actually be contributing to a solution. The report said that the PSC's quality reports are based on a 5-year average. So if my recollection of basic math is correct, then that means that either a steady downward trend or a significant and sudden degradation of quality would mean that that degradation is only reported by 20% in any given year. Lastly, based largely on my ignorance, this being my first council meeting, I'd like to know what exactly is the responsibility of the council in response to this report, and in particular, what power do you have to take action? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll sign in.
Yes, please. Yes, sir. And please make sure you sign in.
Signed in.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm Joe Hannick. I'm at 6175 Northeast 187th Place. I think a lot of the folks kind of touched on the points that I have as well. And I'll just start with, I think Brent did a good job of bringing this up to the gentleman here. Data is your friend. Data, 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 data. I have a technical background. I'm in IT at a large software company down the road. Data is your friend. Let data drive this discussion. I'm a little concerned. I'll be not as sarcastic as I am on Facebook with some of you. I'm a little concerned by the lack of questions that some of you have asked. Maybe you've asked other questions without us here. But you guys need to ask a lot more questions of PSC. You need to get the data, demand the data. The fact that you asked if you could have the data is pretty scary to me. We are their customer. It should not even be a question. Maybe there's some regulatory or things like that that maybe they don't have to share. I don't know. I'm in a different industry. But when I ask I have some experience with contract negotiations. When I ask for data, they have to give it to me because it's in the contract. And if they don't meet those metrics, as KPIs, key performance indicators, there is a penalty. There is a performance penalty, which I think Nigel was asking about. There should be a performance penalty if they don't. And I know they do have one. I think if you're out for 20 hours or so, you get like $50 or so. Well, that's longer than it takes for most people's refrigerators to go bad. So that's several $100s that they've lost at least 4 or 5 times during the last year. So I would basically reiterate, get the data, be aggressive with PSE, please. The power outages, my sister lives in Lake City. They're on Seattle City Light. She's lived there for 30 years. She's had 2 power outages that she can recall in the last 30 years that have lasted more than a couple hours. So, yeah, vegetation happens and everything like that, but if Seattle City Light can keep the lights on for 2 cents more a kilowatt hour or whatever it is, I think it's worth it versus having to spend hundreds of dollars for food and such like that. So keep it. Oh, and to the mayor, I'm sorry, but I on that interview the other night, the news person said that you said that we are sticking with PSC and we're not going. We considered SCL, but we're going to stick with PSC. I think that was a mistake. You don't take your bargaining chip off the table. We need to keep all options open, regardless of what. So that we can force PSC to take action. Thanks.
And just a little clarification. Council is, by state law, a policymaking body. We, by state law, are not involved in day-to-day operations. We can ask the city manager for information, but we can't direct staff, and we certainly can't direct any of the people that we contract with. That is staff's purview. And believe me, we do ask questions. We ask a lot of questions of the city manager, and the city manager has been very, very helpful in us getting information. And yes, and I'll leave it at that. Yes, sir. If I can make sure you sign in after. Sure. Wonderful.
My name's Russ Johnson. I live at 5635 Northeast 202nd Street in Kenmore. And first of all, I just want to make an observation based over the last year or so that I've been involved in trying to figure out what the problems were. And I'm very much encouraged by the attention that the city has placed on this issue and the council. And I think we're seeing some progress. Now, it's not as fast as I would like as a resident on Circuit 26, and I share some of the frustrations that other citizens have expressed here tonight. The thing that I have observed in the last year is that we get contradictory information from Puget Sound Energy. The first presentation from PSE here to your council that I attended, they told us there were 6 circuits. Tonight we see that there are 10 circuits in Kenmore. And so that's concerning to me. A month ago I attended a meeting at the Aqua Club where Puget Sound Energy made a presentation to residents on Circuit 27. And I'm extremely concerned with the process that Puget Sound Energy uses to collect data. We are totally dependent on Puget Sound Energy to provide data. And we know recently here in the last 6 months that Puget Sound Energy intentionally falsified data relating to gas transmission or whatever, and received a significant fine of over $1.3 million for falsifying information. So I think it's a good question for us to ask. How do we know that the data that you're giving us is accurate? And I don't know how they even collect it. If they don't even know that there's an outage until we call them to let them know, I don't know their logging process and how they determine the stopwatch for recording that this is when an outage begins and this is when it's restored. And it's got to be tremendously variable depending on where you're living on any particular circuit. I have personally started keeping a log at my house so that I have a definitive log on what the outages are at my home. And so I'm concerned about the data. And I'm also concerned about the tree trimming problem. If I understand this right, and say again, I've forgotten your other. There's just a 5-foot distance required. Am I saying that right? Would you explain that? Just.
So they have a utility, they can only tree trim within their right of way. And there are some sections of the circuits that the right of way is 5 feet wide. It's 2.5 feet on either side of the wire.
So how long does it take a tree to grow 2.5 feet? One of the gentlemen here said that a 4-year tree trimming cycle is too short. I have to agree. If we've only got 2.5 feet, you can get that easily in a year. And so I'm hoping that part of the lease agreement that we're signing requires that Asplund or whoever's doing this is on a far more vigorous cycle than a 4-year cycle. And those are my observations. I thought the presentation was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Ousley, you got some of the questions and you will get back to the people that need some answers for that stuff. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right. Next item on the agenda is a consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The consent agenda stands approved as written. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. And the public hearing is to receive public testimony regarding ordinance number 16-0432, setting the 2017 tax levy. Ms. Gregory.
Why is this all sparkly?
Okay, good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight, one of the first steps in as we move through the budget process is to hold a public hearing on the 2017 property tax levy. It's one of those things we have to do every year before we approve the budget. We'll have the public hearing on the levy tonight. Next week, we'll hold a public hearing on the preliminary budget itself, followed by a hearing on the budget amendments. And we'll have a second public hearing on the budget and the tax levy on November 28th, right before we bring you the final action request to adopt the 2017 tax levy. The King County Assessor likes to have the tax levy set by the 1st of December every year. And then, assuming all goes well, we will schedule to adopt the budget amendment and the biennial budget for 2017 and 18 on December 12th. So each year, we do need to set the levy and make the decision as to what the levy is going to be. As you recall, that the regulation on this is that you can set a tax levy equal to the lower of 1% or the implicit price deflator. So again, this year the implicit price deflator is less than 1%. However, it's not very much less. It's 0.973% rather than 1%. And for that reason, I'm recommending that we adopt the IPD increase and not a 1%, because to adopt a 1%, the value of that would only be about $1,200. You would need to adopt a resolution of substantial need, and I think this is adequate for our purposes. So the computation that would set the 2017 tax levy would begin with the 2016 levy, which was $4.5 million. Applying the 0.973% to that increase would yield $43,000. Again, this year we were beneficiaries of a considerable amount of new construction going on the tax rolls, which would add $86,000 to the levy. And then there are some prior year refunds of $7,153. So the proposed levy for 2017 is $4,674,122. Looking at that number, that, as I mentioned, includes really favorable new construction of $68 million worth of property going on the tax rolls, which gives us the $86,000 worth of levy. And when we prepared the budget for 17 and 18, prior to receiving this preliminary information from the tax assessor, we budgeted a 1% increase and $86,000 of new construction. So the budget is actually very close to the proposed tax levy. It's only different by $5,613. The 2017 assessed value is up to $3.9 billion. It's a 9% increase in assessed valuation from 2016, and the impact on the tax rate would be to, we project would drop the tax rate to $1.20 per $1,000 of AV, which is about a 6-cent decline from 2016. This is a chart we look at every year where you can see the typical median-priced home tax bill and the portion of that tax bill that accrues to Kenmore, which is still about 11% of the total tax bill. We use 2016 rates because we don't know all the taxing rates for the other jurisdictions at this point in time. But out of a $5,000 general property tax bill, Kenmore would get about $552. There are 12 taxing districts within the city of Kenmore. I like to show these charts because it shows the relationship between assessed valuation over time and the tax rate. You can see that in the early years of the city, as the assessed valuation grew, the tax rate dropped. And then when we came into the recessionary period around 2010, 11, and 12, we see assessed valuations drop, but the tax rate rises slightly to compensate for that and maintain the levy. And then in 2014, the assessed valuation began to rise again. The tax rate dropped accordingly. And at the upper right-hand chart, you can see that the projected tax rate of $1.20 is at the lowest point we've been since incorporation. In the lower right corner is our new construction chart. I like to show this, as you can really see the dramatic changes in new construction over time and what happened in 2010, 11, and 12, and how new construction has started to come back onto the tax rolls. But it is interesting, 2016 was our current high period, and 2017 is not expected to be as great, and I don't believe 2018 will even be to the level of 2017. We had some pretty significant projects across the street going on the tax rolls and some big plats that are now nearing completion. So with that concludes my comments on the property tax levy computation and my recommendation that we increase the levy by the 0.973%. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time and turn it over to the mayor to open a public hearing.
Any questions? All right, no questions at this time. So I will declare the public hearing open to receive testimony regarding ordinance number 16-0432 and the setting of the 2017 tax levy. Anybody wishing to be heard?
There's no one signed up.
Anybody wishing to be heard? And we are looking for anybody who wants to be heard regarding the ordinance number 16-0432 and the setting of the 2017 tax levy. Seeing nobody, I will declare the public hearing closed. And we're having two more public hearings on this issue, or one more.
We'll have one more public hearing on the tax levy
on the tax levy itself, but then there'll be more public hearings on the budget.
And other public hearings throughout the month, yes.
Right. All right. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, next item on the agenda is a review of 2017-2018 proposed preliminary biennial budget. Ms. Gregory. Now, like we've done last year, we're going to go over a few areas, right? And we're going to more or less get our questions asked and sort of sign off on this. Not that we can't ask more questions later, but we're going to try to move through this so that we are not going back and rehashing stuff over and over. So, questions on this stuff? Try and get them asked.
Thank you. Well, good evening again. We're going to dive into the budget itself now. And tonight we'll start the staff presentations and review of the various departments and funds contained in the 2017-18 biennial budget. We'll go over the general fund revenues and then the following departments and cost centers: the City Council budget, City Manager, Finance and Administration, Legal, Public Safety, and Development Services. This presentation contains a pretty high-level overview of each. Please feel free to ask questions as we move into and review each section. I'll begin first, though, with the general fund revenues. So we began the current budget period, 2015 and 16, with a revenue budget of about $20.5 million. We amended that during the mid-biennial review in November of 2015 to $21 million due to a very favorable construction and development period. And as we near the end of the biennium, we project that revenues are going to be about $22.5 million for several reasons, including the continuing positive development climate that we experienced that impacts development permits and plan review, as well as sales tax. Water and sewer franchise fees were greater than expected as well, and the projections include a one-time $150,000 expense reimbursement, which is actually revenue neutral. It's not a revenue source because it offsets an expenditure in one of the general fund departments, but it still shows up on the bottom line. So that brings us to the preliminary 2017 and 18 revenue budget, which is $23.5 million, an increase which assumes a 1% levy increase and $86,000 of new construction. There's also anticipated interfund reimbursements, which we increased, and those account for staff contributing time to capital projects, which are recoverable to us, as well as some administrative overhead. So the salary for the staff is budgeted in the various department expense budgets, but as projects are charged for that time, it's reimbursed back to the general fund as revenue. So even with a reduced level of development revenues and with other categories being flat or minimally increasing, the revenue picture is an improvement over 15 and 16. We spent some time discussing how the 2017 property tax levy was developed, and I'll just add to that the 2018 levy for the budget also includes an assumption of a 1% increase, but only $25,000 worth of new construction, as we don't see any big construction projects coming down the pipeline. With sales tax, that was adjusted to reflect the average revenues of the last 12 months, but then we reduced it for that favorable sales tax on new construction that is not going to be an ongoing revenue source, and then added a 2% growth factor for both years. Electric and gas utility taxes are projected to grow at about 2% over the current year average, but telephone and cell phone utility taxes are not expected to increase. Also, franchise fees on the two cable franchises are budgeted to increase 2%, but we left water and sewer franchise fees at their current budgeted levels. I had a conversation with North Shore Utility District. They may increase their fees after the first of the year, but it wasn't certain, so I didn't project anything at this point. As noted earlier, development revenues are expected to decline. Permits, land use review, inspection, others are expected to decrease compared to 2015 and 16. The liquor tax distributions, I get this information from Municipal Research, MRSC. They project a per capita distribution, and they're actually projecting that our liquor excise tax distributions will have a significant increase, but then the share of the liquor board profits will have a slight decline. And generally, liquor board profits are not expected to go up at all over time based on actions that the legislature took a few years ago. So they just kind of bounce around at a pretty level amount. I mentioned the reimbursements of staff costs to the general fund earlier due to time spent and chargeable on capital projects. This line item also includes reimbursements such as credit card fees, which we have experienced a pretty significant charge to our general fund for credit card fees, but if the fee resolution is approved this evening, we'll be able to start passing those fees on. Also, there's some costs associated with the Lake Point project budgeted in the general fund departments, and a reimbursement of $100,000 is added in that line item. Gambling revenues from pull tabs and games have been showing a kind of slow and steady increase over time, so we've inserted a moderate increase. And then there are other revenues new to the general fund, such as the North Shore School District funding for the school resource officer that you'll see in the revenue section of the general fund budget. Other revenues not mentioned tonight are either projected to stay about the same or experience a very minor change. So that concludes the general fund revenue picture. Are there any questions about the revenue specifically?
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I have a question on the gambling revenue, where there's the tab that says 80% increase over the 2015-16 budget. So why is that an 80% increase?
I budgeted it too low in 15 and 16. I mean, I just didn't expect it to grow.
Okay, because when I saw it was only at 1.4% increase up above it, and I was trying to figure out where the difference was so big. Okay.
That's a good question. I see where it's confusing. So the budget was very low, and as the 15 and 16, as time went on, we could see that that revenue source is going to be higher than anticipated. So our projection is quite a bit higher than the budget, and our new budget is higher to reflect that.
Great. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Under development revenues, the permits and land use review and all that, those are dollars in, dollars out. I mean, they reflect the amount of work that's being done for these. So the expenses would decrease accordingly, wouldn't they? For permits and land use review and inspections and all that?
Except for the staff costs associated with those.
Staff costs
well,
associated with something that isn't being done?
Well, for the
30%
development
decrease
services.
in permit revenue, that would be 30% decrease in permits, wouldn't it? And
yes.
30% decrease in the amount of work that's needed to check those permits out, right?
Correct.
Okay, so shouldn't it be a wash, income and expense?
No, it's not exactly a wash. Where we have to contract outside the city in order to accomplish those services, those would be reduced. But we don't anticipate cutting back on staff as a result of these decreases at this point in time. We still have, the Lake Point project going on that demands a lot of the development services time. And, hello. And we're going to review the development services budget tonight as well. And Brian Hampson, the Director of Development Services, who helped develop the revenue projections, can maybe speak more thoroughly about.
Yeah, as I recall, in previous years when we've adjusted the permit fees and so on, it's been stressed that it is the fees for permits are driven by the expense involved in servicing those permits. Now, when they go up, there are more fees coming in that helps compensate for it. But there's no built-in adjustment downward in expenses?
Not at this point in time, no.
Okay.
Well, actually, we have brought in temporary staff to come and meet the workload demand of these higher revenues in the last couple of years. And the biennium budget assumes that one of those temporary positions goes away, and the other one will stay as needed. And if revenues go down and the workload goes down, then that other position will go away too. So just to recap, we've had 2 temporary positions come in to fill the peak workload. One of those is going to be going away in this next biennium, and the other one may go away if the workload drops as well. In addition, and I think Brian, when he gets up here, he can talk more about this, but even with this temporary staff that he's had, the service that he would like to provide his customers hasn't been where he wants it to be. The turnaround time and the attention to the customer hasn't been where he wants it to be because the workload's been so high. And he hasn't brought all the staffing that he'd like up to meet that level. So, so two things. We will have temporary positions go away, but also we hope to maintain or improve the level of service as well and allow the employees to put more quality time into the permit applications and provide better turnaround time as well. Brian's nodding his head.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move into the general fund expenditures. So the 2015-16 original expenditure budget was $20.5 million and amended to $22.7 million during the mid-biennial review. And that was primarily to reflect the bulk of it transfers to the Strategic Opportunities Fund and the Town Green and Hangar Construction Project and SR 522. Whoops, I didn't mean to move that forward. The projection is to end the biennium at about $23.6 million. We've experienced some increased legal costs, insurance costs, court, and jail greater than expected. So we have also had some initiatives and programs that we've been performing during the year, such as the Public Works Service Analysis, the Energy Audit. You approved some financial management software systems. So we will be bringing to you later this month a budget amendment to account and provide a budget for those items. Our 2017-18 preliminary expenditure budget is $23.3 million, which is somewhat less than that projection, as our interfund transfers are not expected to be as significant. Also, the traffic engineer, which has previously been budgeted and accounted for in the general fund public works department, is going to be reclassified to the street fund. And there is a possibility that we would like to speak to you about. If we close 2015-16 with a greater than expected fund balance, we may make a recommendation to transfer a portion of that, again, to the Strategic Opportunities Fund, as we did at the end of 2014. Even so, we hope that we'll be able to recognize or experience a reduction in legal costs over 2015 and 16. We've got some increases in staffing that we are going to talk to you about. The police contract, the court contract, jail, and liability insurance are all going up. And then you'll see in the salary and benefits expenditures, we are using a 4% inflator for salaries, which is the same as what I use in the projections that we review once or twice a year. So to be consistent, 4% has been included for each year. 2017 employee benefits reflect a 4.5% increase, and 2016 or 18 reflect a 6% increase. So again, those are the same salary and benefit projections that we use when we look at our long-range forecast. This graph can illustrate for you the side-by-side comparison of the 2015-16 amended budget for each department compared to the 2017 and 18 preliminary budget. You can see where the significant increases are. So that concludes the overall expenditure review, and now we would go into the individual department reviews unless you have any questions regarding the information just presented.
Could you, I believe you told us in the past, but I noticed the insurance liability was significantly higher. What was the reason for that?
The reason for that, that's in my little budget section. So that went up 18%. They have given us an estimate for 2017 that's an 18% increase, and it's liability insurance that's going up. 9% of that is from WCIA themselves, passing through the increases they're receiving from their brokers and underwriters. And the other 9% reflects our claims experience. For our census group, our claim experience is kind of high, and that's reflected in the rates that we are paying for liability insurance.
Okay,
So it's a combination of those two factors.
And then one other thing on the legal expenses, because I know they've been so high this year and last year, and they're projected significantly lower going forward. Can you tell me why we anticipate them to be so much lower? I don't like the fact they're so high, but I would just like to understand.
Well, I'm hoping that some of the issues that have been ongoing will be wrapped up. Earlier in this biennium, we were pretty pleased with the level of cost in the legal services department until a couple of surface water and land use issues came up, which required a significant amount of city attorney time. So I'm sure that Rob will want to tag on to this, but I'm hoping that some of those will get resolved, and we will have a better handle on the use of the city attorney's time as we move forward, and we won't have those types of issues repeated. Code enforcement issues, surface water issues, et cetera. So we're not budgeting as high as we're projecting for this biennium, but it's higher than we budgeted for last biennium.
Yeah, perhaps to echo what Joanne just said, there are it's kind of a peak year for some kind of anomalous code enforcement cases this year that have really been driving up our legal costs. We're hoping that this year is just an anomaly type of a year, and that those code enforcement cases will calm down a bit. And I don't want to list off each one, but you may be aware of which ones we're talking about. Also, we have a new code enforcement officer, building inspector. Her name's Debbie Blessington, and you guys met her tonight, right?
Right.
Oh, good. Okay, great. She and Brian have both been talking about how they can use more staff resources when preparing for hearings in front of hearing examiners, and taking on those cases more themselves at the staff level and relying less on attorneys. Sorry, Rod.
We are encouraging that, by the way.
Yes, thank you. That is a really good point. Yeah, they are encouraging that. And Debbie she comes from Bothell, and she's used to taking on a lot of that burden herself in preparing for cases and taking them to the hearing examiner. So that's another area where we want to cut down on attorney time, is actually when we go to the hearing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spray.
Just a comment. When I was looking at the budget book, and it said percentage of code enforcement cases that were basically settled, and it said 98%. And I was shocked because we spend all our time with the other 2%. So I thought that was very good context, that 98% of the time these things are settled before there's some kind of legal action.
Public safety. I know we're going to get into that, but this is on this graph here.
Yes. We are going to talk about public safety this evening. And
okay,
Chief Souther is here with us.
I will hold off until we get there.
I'm sorry, you will hold off?
I will hold off until we get there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Well, then we can move forward into the individual departmental budgets if that's what you wish to do. And we'll start with the City Council.
Good evening. The City Council budget is at a 9% increase over the previous biennium, and it does reflect the salary commission action that became effective in 2016. I think the we could go to the next slide, please. The thing that we rely on the council for, in addition to policy leadership, is your really amazing involvement with different intergovernmental organizations and policy-making organizations. It really helps to have those relationships and the context that brings to help us with a whole array of programs and policy initiatives that we have. We literally ran out of room on this slide because I know Councilmember Sperry represents the council on the Kenmore Library Board, and I know we're missing other opportunities and leadership roles that you all bring to the table with the different organizations that you're involved with. So it's important, and we appreciate what the council does in those forums. Are there any questions?
Questions?
Okay.
Nope.
We'll move to the city manager's budget.
I'll begin with that. I was struck by the graphic on this page. And you know what it reminded me of?
Uh-oh.
This has been on my desk for a long time. And in the spirit of where's the fun, I'm not going to turn him on, but this is something I bought years ago, and it's called the Yes Man. And it's voice activated, so if you speak, it says, "I'm sure what you're saying is absolutely correct." How do you do it? But anyway, that's what this graphic reminded me of. But
I'm glad neither of them look like me at all. So.
Yeah, the ties are different. Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't wear a red tie tonight.
So, as with the council budget, there's a 9% increase in the city manager's department budget over the 2015-16 biennium. 7 FTEs, but this budget also includes money for interns, which we have, and temporary analyst staff that we have used to our great advantage over this last year. And I believe that number for interns or temporary policy staff is about 46,000, correct?
Correct.
The other highlights are the human services contracts. That's been funded at a per capita level. We've had a population increase, and so that is going up. And the Arch Capital or trust fund contribution from the general fund remains at $30,000 a year. I will point out that actually the total contribution from the city not only includes the general fund, but there is a portion of the allocation from the Community Development Block Grant Consortium that we're a part of that goes to Arch, and as well as other actions that are taken with respect to affordable housing from year to year. So, in fact, the 2016 contribution to Arch from the city of Kenmore was $71,000 when you add in those other items, and for 2015 it was just over $100,000. So that's the general fund portion at $30,000 that we're referring to on the slide. And then, of course, a big push for 2017 and 18 is the town square and hangar completion and startup. And we have made this a priority, it's got to be perfect when this thing opens, and the service level has to be perfect, and the experience for people visiting the hangar in Town Green has to really set a high bar, and I'm sure the council agrees with how important that is. And Rob has put in another graphic here about the upward trajectory of becoming. I don't have any props that respond to that. But obviously the city manager's office plays a central role in the administration and marshaling resources to meet demands, some of which we've planned for and some that come up unexpectedly. We do know that Lake Point is going to be a big focus this next biennium, and you'll hear more about that in the Development Services project or budget. There are other special projects that again, some are planned, some come up, and are opportunities that we want to take advantage of. Also, regional organizations and contracts, a lot of them are managed out of the city manager's budget, and we represent the city often on executive boards of some of those regional organizations. Some of the other ways that the city manager's office plays that central role is that often our staff in this department is the first line of contact that people have with the city, whether or not it's at the front desk reception or when public records requests are filed. And I will mention that the number of public records requests continues to increase each year. And so that is a mandated function and one that we are meeting our obligations about response time and responsiveness to public records requests.
Nancy, can we go back to Human Services? You may have touched on this, so I apologize if I'm repeating it, but if you just go back to that following slide. So what we're recommending that you do is continue the $7.53 per capita and let it go up with population. So it's about a $15,000 to $16,000 increase over the prior biennium. Is that right?
$14,000.
$14,000 increase, or so $7,000 per year increase over the prior biennium, just by letting it go up with population.
Yep, and so we're currently funding 20 programs, and our recommendation is to fund mostly the same programs at or near the level as in the current biennium, dependent upon the evaluation of their application based on the city's funding criteria, which includes the number of residents served. With the increase in funding, there's a possibility of adding 2 new programs, one that would focus on providing services to seniors, and one on the opposite side of the spectrum, which would provide services to children. So those are some opportunities that we're looking at.
And Leslie, the Senior Center is requesting a $3,000 increase. We're still working with them on the justification for that, but could this increase here include that as well?
Yes, correct. Yep, I have a meeting with the Senior Center tomorrow morning to discuss their proposal for the additional $3,000 in funding.
Thank you for that.
So economic development obviously is in the city manager's budget. It has increased a bit over the last biennium, mainly because of 2 activities. One is that we want to get started on updating the economic development strategy. It was adopted in 2009, and I always like to implement plans rather than even though I've spent a lot of time being a planner in my career, but I think it's time for a tune-up, and we can at least get started and have kind of conditions report that prepared that can also point out what the opportunities are for us. Now, some 8 years since 7 to 8 years since the strategy was adopted. The other thing that represents an increase in the economic development budget is a real focus on business recruitment. And we feel like this is the right time to prioritize this. Not that we haven't been recruiting businesses, but we want to put more of a focus on it because, again, it's timely with the Kenmore Village development, the Main Street development getting completed, and also the hangar and town green, and just the everything is more tangible now than it was a few years ago. So we think that this is the point to really go after not only new businesses coming to town, but where are they going to locate? And so we really want to prioritize enticing office space investment in our city because we want to have a place for them to be. And then obviously with other major developments coming online, there's opportunities to team up with the development teams to participate in business recruitment. So that is going to be the other increase for us. Really, all the other programs that you see that have to do with economic development in that page that shows the different programs are actually either at same level as last biennium or down a little bit. And so we are excited about working again with the Economic Development Council and of Seattle-King County and with Bastyr University on the Natural Health Hub. And so there is some money, less than we had for the previous biennium, but still there. And then, as you know, we're enjoying seeing some grant money come our way. The Port of Seattle grant is an example of that. That is helping to spruce up some of our marketing materials because we're going to use Port of Seattle grant funds for some updated professional photography that will go into those marketing pieces. And then I think we've been very pleased with how our media relations and marketing consultants have gotten the word out about Kenmore, and so we are continuing that contract in this proposed budget. A couple of other things that I'm really excited to be working on this next biennium is some other ways of connecting with our business community. And one is having sector breakfasts. So even though we have those kind of general business open houses a couple of times a year, we're going to have probably quarterly breakfast meetings with different sectors, whether it's the financial sector, the real estate sector, just to get a better idea of what's going on in our own business community. And then we're going to be working on some business incentives, too. So Leslie's going to talk about marketing and communications.
Great. So the budget for the marketing, communications, and volunteerism and events is at the same level as in 15 and 16 budget. As Nancy mentioned, for our marketing and promoting the city, I'm going to start there since she mentioned Gallatin. They've been great help with getting sharing Kenmore's story through local and regional print and broadcast media. Some of the examples include with the recent 522 improvement project, the ribbon cutting ceremony. We had stories on Cairo and Q13. With the Governor's Smart Communities Award, they helped with sharing the story about the Kenmore Village Development Partnership with Main Street Property Group. On the Kenmore Mural Project, Como News came out, and they did a really great social media graphic, and Kenmore Reporter and Shoreline Area News came out as well and interviewed the artists in the community and published stories. Some of the business features, we've had quite a few business features. As Nancy's doing the more outreach with businesses, we're connecting to really interesting and unique types of businesses. For example, the handcrafted champagne sabers, there's a story on King 5 television, and the Washington Beer blog and Evening Magazine also aired a story on biking and the Burke Gilman Trail to stop at 192 9 Yards and Karen Brewery. And there was a really great Evening Magazine story that aired and reached a broad audience. The Ramen Raider was on Como News. And we're also working with Daddy's Donuts. Recently, they were named one of the top donuts places in Washington State. So we're hoping to get some media coverage. All these businesses, they've enjoyed being in Kenmore. They have a great connection to the city, and they want to share that. So with Gallatin's support, we've been able to do that, accomplish that, and get our story out to help support all of our economic development efforts. And also, one other thing that is significant to mention is Mayor Baker's participation in the Focus Forward panel on ST3 in September. That's excellence exposure for Kenmore to the greater Seattle business community. On the Target Zero initiative, we will continue. This morning we had a lot of fun. We did a pop-up party at the Kenmore Park and Ride, and we just talked to bus commuters. We had coffee and snacks and flashing, blinking lights, and just continue to talk about pedestrian and bicycle safety and being alert, being seen, just getting feedback from the community as well. And we'll continue to do school presentations and outreach, such as Walk to School Day, participate in school fairs and in classrooms. I've already been in touch with the Arrowhead Elementary ASB advisor, and she wants to invite us back out and have the students, which is great, students participate and have the spin wheel and have them ask the students questions. So that's what's under the Target Zero initiative for education and outreach. For publications, just continuing our printed quarterly newsletter and the monthly e-newsletter, which started last year, and listserv, which is through GovDelivery, and sending out our news releases and just continuing that dialogue, informing the community on what's going on in the community or in the city. Website and social media, continuing to update the website. So people will continue to be interested in visiting. And then also we have a Downtown Kenmore blog. With the help of Melody, Communications Assistant, we've been able to update that more frequently. And we also share that through our social media, so it gets people to visit the blog and updates on what's going on in our downtown with construction or activities, businesses, just photos. And then staying active on Facebook. We've seen quite a growth this past year with the number of likes or followers. Same with Twitter, Nextdoor. Our Kenmore community was really excited to see the city on Nextdoor, so we'll continue to have that presence and hopefully grow our Instagram and tell the Kenmore side through photography. And speaking of photos, we have received, through the Port of Seattle, we received a grant, and we will use that funding to help update our photo database. It's been a few years since we've had some professional photos to use in our marketing materials and promotions and website, so we're going to use funding toward that. For volunteerism and events, in March of this year, we increase the number of hours from part-time, three-quarter time to full-time for volunteer and event supervisor, and that's when we brought on Sarah Sandquist. In addition to planning and implementing the city's annual special events, including the summer concert series, fireworks show, Play Day and Christmas tree lighting festival. We're excited to plan new activities in downtown Kenmore. Just last weekend or last Friday, Sarah helped organize the Halloween at the Hall. It was so much fun. There's hundreds of kids and adults that join us to trick or treat, meet Woody and Jesse. So we want to keep that event in our downtown, but hopefully expand it over to the hangar as well. There's definitely lots of people that could expand to the entire downtown area. And we will add other events to the Newtown Square, including movies on the square, and hopefully bring back the Why I Love Kenmore block party. We'd love to bring that back as well. And we'll also continue to demonstrate support for external events, such as the Kenmore Hydroplane Cup and others as appropriate. And in addition, we recently received a proposal to develop a mobile app to help share the story of the new Kenmore mural. So we're working on that proposal, and we'll bring it forward to council soon.
And that current proposal is not included in the budget. Because we got it kind of late, and we still have questions on it we're still working through. When we get answers to those questions, we'll bring it back to you in a couple of weeks.
I'd like to mention also that in the city manager's budget, you'll find support for the Arts of Kenmore, the City Hall Gallery at the same level that it has been this past biennium. And then also, and I believe you have this at your desk tonight, received a request from the Kenmore Heritage Society for some website upgrades. Be very timely for them to help build their membership base, and so that is included in the proposed budget.
Also, Leslie mentioned earlier, but I just want to kind of drive it home again. Sarah Sandquist, who's right back here. Hi. You guys all know Sarah by now, I'm sure. One of the reasons why her position was increased to full-time was because of the hangar and the town green and the programming that's going to go on there. So she'll have the lead role on programming that new public space. If I could just point out a couple of things. Leslie Harris has always been involved with volunteerism and public relations and media and all that, but her job has kind of evolved with technology over the years. It's been kind of fun. About 4.5 years ago, we got into social media and started a Facebook page, and now we're branching off into Nextdoor and things like that, and our website itself has come a long ways under her leadership. And so I just want to thank Leslie publicly for all the things she's done to market and promote the city and tap into new technology as it becomes available and as it becomes useful and practical. So, and then to save time, I actually instructed my coworkers not to go over 2015, 2016 accomplishments, because if we did, we would be here for a couple more hours for each department. But what I do want to do is direct your attention, for example, in the city manager's office, pages 83 through 85, you'll see a list of accomplishments in the prior biennium. Please take the time to read those, because we're not going to be going over those during our budget presentations. And this is an example. The city manager's office is just one example. If you see the other departments, they'll have just as impressive lists of accomplishments that were completed. Also, council goals number 1 and 2, pedestrian and bicycle safety, council goal number 1, economic development, council goal number 2. Under your direction, I tend to put resources towards your goals in priority order. So lots of resources go to pedestrian bicycle safety. We're putting lots of resources towards economic development because it is council goal number 2, and so on. So that's part of a major portion of what went through my thought process as we develop the budget is what are the council goals in priority and where should resources go in that priority. Yeah, that's it.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, I'm glad to see that the economic development strategy is going to be updated too. I think that's really neat, and I know our city manager mentioned it in his letter. But when you look at the 4 goals of the strategy from 2009, I think when it was completed, we've really done, I think, a really good job of working towards those, and I mean they're abstract enough that there is no finite end, but they're also clear enough that they provide really good direction. And I think the staff and city manager, I think you deserve some kudos for that, because it really is, it's clear. I remember when that report came out, and I remembered, how do you get there? And when I look back now over almost 8 years, it's like I think we've done a really amazing job getting there.
It's been a really good guidepost.
Yeah, good.
Where to put resources.
Yeah, no, that's been a great plan that we continue to follow today. Another great plan that I continue to follow, and I hope we all do, and that is the 2003 downtown strategy plan. That's been a great guide, and it's been a plan that actually, if you read it carefully, the pieces of that plan are coming together. Maybe not exactly like we thought, but the major pieces of that are coming to fruition.
Move forward?
Move forward.
Okay, thank you. Well, the next department is Finance and Administration, which, as you know, includes the city clerk. Our budget is $2 million, which is about almost a 15% increase over the prior biennium, and I'll explain the reason for that in a moment. It's about 8% of the general fund. Our FTEs are not changing. There are 4 of us in my department, and there will continue to be so. But my finance administration budget is affected by, here's a number of issues. Particularly, the big driver is the liability insurance, which, if you remember, used to be in non-department, but it's now in the finance budget. And again, that 18% increase was a combination of increases being passed on from the brokers and the underwriters that provide the insurance layers to WCIA. In fact, that increase was 11%, and WCIA subsidized 2%, so they only had to pass on 9% to their members. And then the balance of it is a calculation based on our claim experience and then some reflection of our increased worker hours. Also, as you know, and you approved the Tyler Technology Financial Management System, that the bulk of those expenses occurred in 2016, but the balance won't be paid until we fully implement later in, I don't want to jinx myself, I don't mean later next year, in the next year. So we'll still have a little bit of fee to pay on that purchase and implementation. So that's the $19,600. We are starting our implementation finally after all these many months, and very excited because we feel it's going to change our lives forever. I wanted to point out that putting this budget together for all the departments is really awkward, and they have to deal with multiple spreadsheets. We have to, make sure all those spreadsheets are tie together, check out, and add up, and it's very, very, very difficult. And the city's never had a system where we could use a software that has the history and has all the transactions, and in which you could budget for the next year. And that's what we'll be moving to as we move into our next budget cycle. But the departments did just a really commendable job pulling their budgets together with the awkward tools that we have to do that with. So we're so excited about this financial management system.
And can you tell them about something that you and I are excited about, but most people may not be, and that is bars and how what we were talking about this afternoon?
I got to clarify bars real quick.
Yes, not
budgeting and accounting reporting system.
Yeah, not taverns. Yes.
Right.
So
right.
the BARS manual.
BARS manual, the guidance that the state of Washington gives us for reporting, accounting, budgeting, and then audit, of course. So we've never we haven't been able to implement the guidance that they give us, which is how to structure your accounts that make it easy to roll up into categories such as services and supplies and personnel and capital and
intergovernmental,
and then different types of revenues as well. So all that is all done manually on spreadsheets of various kinds and various formats. So we're very excited that when in the new financial management system, we will move to a BARS reporting system. And at the end of the year, when we prepare our audit report for the state auditors, we have to report that way. So we have to take all of our data for the year that's in one system, and we have to manipulate it and report it in another system. And it's such a waste of time and effort. So we're looking forward to getting away from that.
Yeah, thank you.
Some of the other costs, though, that affect the finance and administration department is the ongoing software support. So with the Tyler Technologies software, our annual fee for maintenance and support is about double what it had been with Fundware. Well worth the price, though, but it does impact our budget by about $15,000. And earlier this year, you generously approved an employee recognition program, which becomes part of the administration budget, and that we anticipate will be about $5,100 over the biennium. I've included a fee from the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting of $13,000 to continue to use their online PBB tool, so we can continue to become familiar with that and utilize it to its fullest capability and explore new ways of analyzing our costs and our budget going forward. And this is a double-edged sword, but due to our good record of receiving a lot of federal grant funding, we'll probably have pretty comprehensive audits for the next 2 years, and I don't think we'll be able to skip very much as far as every other year audits. So I increased the audit costs a little bit over the prior biennium because we'll have single audits as well as financial audits for 16 and 17, which will impact our costs in 17 and 18. And then due to more staff, more laptops, newer and growing technology, surfaces, iPads, et cetera, our network costs are really starting to creep up there. So I've provided for an increase in network support over the biennium as well. Are there any questions about the...
So the increased frequency of audits, is that due partially to some of the federal monies we've got for some of the projects around here?
Yes.
Is that the reason?
Yes. When you expend a certain level of federal assistance, $750,000 a year or more, you're required to have a special audit for that purpose.
And federal funds were tied up in a couple of the sidewalk projects, right?
And the bridge.
And the bridge.
Yes. So it'll be following us for a while, but that's a good thing.
Any other questions?
Question. So why did you pick this particular cartoon? The juggling bar.
Oh, I just thought it was cute. It kind of made putting this all together a little bit more fun. But, finance administration handles not only finance and budgeting, but also human resources and network support. So, good. Cover a few bases.
Previous people have suggested a barbecue apron would be good, too.
A what?
Barbecue apron.
A barbecue apron.
Cooking the books.
Oh, that hurts. I remember that, though.
That was previous people.
I know. Anything else on finance administration? Okay. The next budget In the book is the legal budget. This, again, is the city attorney costs and other attorney costs as needed. Services are provided by contract, not FTEs. Our 2015-16 budget was optimistically $440,000. We project it's probably going to be about $650,000 before we end the year. But as we discussed earlier, we hope to kind of get a handle on some of the costs and settle some issues. So we've optimistically selected a budget of $500,000, which is still a 13% increase over the prior year. Without naming specifically, there have been a number of code violations, public works issues, all which have required the assistance of the city attorney. So some things have just been out of our hands when it comes to legal costs.
The settlement agreement with KGM earlier this year, the city attorney's office really stepped up and did a lot to help us with that case. And what I'm realizing is it's great to have a city with a waterfront, and living on the lake is just a wonderful thing, but it costs money to have your city on the lake. And there's numerous issues where we are involved that have to do with our waterfront that cost us money. So KGM is one example.
And another example is we had, for the first time since my firm has been representing the city, an appeal to the Shoreline Hearings Board, which you might recall. And that was very expensive to prepare for. And as you might recall, the plaintiffs or the appellants dismissed a lawsuit the day before the hearing. But a lot of time and expense was put into that case prior to the dismissal. So we're very hopeful that next year our expenses will be significantly less.
Yeah,
and I do want to say that Rob Kerlins and I have had discussions about ways in which we can encourage the staff to take on more responsibility for some issues that currently we cover. And I'm very confident that with our new code enforcement officer, we probably will be reducing our code enforcement expenses for legal by quite a bit next year.
Yeah, and also on code violation issues, there's being right and making the point and hitting on the principle of the matter versus practical, and how far do we take a case. And Councilmember Curtis gave me some good guidance on that a couple weeks ago. He says, look at the safety issue and look at how ticked off the neighbors are. And if it isn't a safety issue and the neighbors aren't ticked off, do you really want to take it to the nth degree? And so I thought that was good advice. When do we, out of practicality and cost-saving sake, hit the pause button or tap the brakes on code cases before taking them all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which we haven't done.
We went there with the gambling issue.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Next, we have the remnants of the non-department department. This, as you know, used to, prior to 2015, contain a lot of non-allocated expenses, and then last biennium with priority-based budgeting, and for other good reasons, I think, we took those expenses because somebody has to be responsible for them, and we allocated them to what we thought were the most appropriate departments. So what we use non-department for now is just to record our interfund transfers and to hold the projected ending fund balance. So in 2017-18, the projected transfers include $1 million to the street fund, and this $1 million to the street fund from the general fund is the same water sewer franchise fee revenue that we saw earlier. And in practicality, whatever water sewer franchise fee revenue we receive, based on our understanding when we implemented that, we will transfer to the street fund. So if it's more we will transfer more. If it's less, we'll transfer what we receive. But we budgeted $1 million of revenue and have budgeted to move that to the street fund for street operations and maintenance. Also included in our interfund transfers are $203,000 of funds to go to the Kenmore Village Fund for operational support of the town square and the hangar. So that's a 2-year commitment. There's also $125,000 budgeted here to go to the Kenmore Village Fund for the town green art. And then we estimate that the projected ending fund balance for the general fund, based on the budget presented, will be $3.3 million. Do you want to speak anything to the art? Any questions about the transfers?
The art is just a carry forward from this current biennium that we had already planned. I'm really pleased with the ending fund balance of 3.3. You may recall that the general fund used to have $5 million in it, and we took half of that, sent it over to strategic ops, leaving $2.5 million in fund balance in the general fund. And so this is showing growth in general fund balance to 3.3. Also, Joanne mentioned we're projecting $1.9 million in the strategic opportunities fund. However, if this budget turns out better than projected, and it pretty much always does, we're likely to transfer additional funds into strategic opportunities. And soon after this biennium is over, the hope is to bring it back to $2.5 million or more. So I predict that come March of 2017, it's a loose prediction, so don't hold me to it, but I bet March 2017 we'll probably be coming back to you with a recommendation to bring strategic ops up to its original $2.5 million. My finance director is nodding her head. That is wonderful. Thank you, Joanne, for that vote of confidence.
Of course.
So.
Yeah. Well, our projection for the end of 2016 is to end this biennium at 3.1.
Yeah.
So if that comes true, we should be able to do that easily.
And so a question I always ask, we don't have to answer it right now, but you know, if the original goal was 2.5 million fund balance for the general fund, which is more than your policy requires, you have a policy of 20% fund balance. 2.5 million is more than the 20% that you require of yourselves, and therefore 3.3 million is more. Does it stand to reason that we should put the amount above 2.5 million to work somewhere? Again, I'm not asking you to answer that question now, but something to ponder and think about.
Yes, Councilmember Curtis.
I just have a minor question. So on one line it says Town Square and Hangar, and on another line it says Town Green Art. So are we thinking it'll be a square or a green?
It's a square now.
It's a square. I'm.
Yeah, because it's not as green as a green might make you think. Yes, it's a square rectangle.
Yeah,
I apologize. In the process of changing our terminology, it looks like.
I think I've used square and green inconsistently throughout the budget, so I'll be updating the greens to the squares.
Search green square. Find and replace.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the interfund transfers? All right, public safety.
Hey, Mayor and council members, good evening. So public safety provides police, jail, court, prosecution, and public defense services. Police and court services are provided through a contract with King County. Jail services are provided through a contract with the South Correctional Entity, which is nicknamed SCORE, and King County. The total 2017-18 budget is $8,756,304. This represents an 8.4% increase over the last biennium, and it also represents 37% of the general fund. The FTEs, you have a police chief, a detective, and 12 police officers, which represents 14 contracted positions. We did, remember this last year, we took one patrol position and made that a half-time motor patrol position to help with traffic enforcement and to help reach the targets of the goals of Target Zero. The budget highlights, police contract for the next 2 years is $6,753,382. 2017 represents a 4.1% increase, and we're estimating that the 2018 police budget will be approximately 3% increase. Court is $271,570 over the next 2 years, which represents a 51% increase over the last biennium. Last biennium we had $180,000. And then the jail contract is about a 16% increase over the next 2 years. We're estimating a little over $1 million. One thing about the jail is that last year, I think it was last year, maybe a year and a half ago, there was a recent law change with DUIs, which made it mandatory to book a DUI arrest into jail if they had a previous DUI arrest or conviction within the last 10 years. So that increased the amount of bookings that we had. Also, we've had some long-term residents, I guess we could call it, in the jail that had some significant jail time imposed by the court. One thing that we did do, and it's kind of the highlights here, is we just recently this month, the first of this month, the City of Shoreline and the City of Kenmore was able to get the court on board with doing a warrant release program for driving while suspended third warrants only. So if anybody has a warrant out for their arrest for driving while suspended, usually we get booked into jail. We take the officer about 2.5 hours out of the city to run all the way down to the jail and back, sometimes 3 hours depending upon the time of day. And then we incur the court cost or the jail cost of the booking and whatnot. So this program is going to have a positive impact on us, hopefully a large one, but we don't know just yet. It allows us to take that drive while suspended third warrant, and if they're cooperative and agree to it, fill out a piece of paper and give them a court date the following Monday to show up on and to release them without booking them. And if they fail to show up in court the following Monday, then another warrant for the arrest will be issued and they will not be able to participate in that program again.
Chief, when you say third warrant, are you saying that these people have been caught 3 times?
No, this is driving while suspended third. It's a degree.
Oh, good.
So there's 3 degrees of no.
I know that it's a little later than, but I was like, this seemed really good. And then that, okay, so that, like if there was any type of DUI or alcohol, none of that applies, right? It's just the person's for some reason.
Just a suspended third driving offense.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a lot of those because we have state route running through here. A lot of people are suspended, and so we do make quite a few arrests, and there are a lot of FTAs. So we're hoping that this program will help reduce the jail costs and also will give us time, reducing the amount of time that the officer is out of the city running after these, what we call chippy warrants. So if they fail to appear in court the next Monday, then a new warrant will be issued, and they'll have a $5 addition onto the back of the warrant. So if it's a $5,000 warrant, it'll be a $5,005 warrant, which tells us if it ends with 5, they don't get to participate in the program again. So that's kind of a new ad that we're trying. We already got a chance to put it into place. Last week we had a warrant out of Issaquah Jail that they wanted us to come pick up. It was a Kenmore warrant for driving while suspended third. We simply faxed them the copy of the paperwork. The suspect filled it out, signed it, sent it back. It saved us 3 hours out of the city plus the booking fee. So hopefully we'll see this work in a positive way. Also, a school resource officer, we're getting $35,000 a year from the North Shore School District for the SRO position. This is revenue neutral. It's just money that they had previously had with the county. It was a contract with King County that we were managing through the county. This way it gives us more control over the time and allows us to actually give more time to the school, because the county was charging the school district a loaded cost, and we're just charging this program on the overtime cost, which is more time, less charge. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Curtis and Councilmember Herbig.
So it seems like over the years, the police and the judicial departments have come up with creative ways to save money. So I was wondering, do you guys, like a bunch of smart people, sit around and like do a lean project or something, or how do these things come about, and could we maximize this kind of thinking? I'm really encouraged by just the problem solving, the way you guys are trying to say, can we do the same job better? And there are structured ways to do that. So I guess that's the question. Do you have a structure to analyze all your processes and see if we could maybe do something better?
I think we're always constantly looking at, providing the service in a more economical and better way. So we're always looking at a lot of different things. And as things come up that look plausible, that we could probably take the ball and run with it, we do that. And other things, we just have to, put it in the county's ball court and see what they can come up with and help us out with that. So, but we're constantly always looking to try to save money and to try to make things a little better.
Well, we appreciate that. Considering what large percentage of our budget this is, it's important to try to give the same service at a lower cost.
And there are some things under this costing center that I have no control over, like the courts and the jail and that kind of stuff. But we always kind of are looking at trying to stick our nose in those areas also to see if we can't make things a little better.
Thank you.
Councilmember Herbig.
Could you speak a little bit to the 51% increase in the court costs? What's driving that? Is that just court? Are the costs of court going up? We're expecting to bring more people. I mean, what's driving that?
I'm going to have to defer that to Joanne.
That's fairly significant. So
I don't mean to throw you under the bus on this one, but
well, yeah, you do. Well, it is one of those costs that surprisingly goes up a lot every year, and this cost it's not the true cost of the court. What this dollar represents is the excess cost of the court that our fines and forfeitures don't cover. And every year, in my experience, it has increased. So either the revenues and the fines are not great enough to cover the costs of the court, or there's something else going on. But this budget was based on the average of the current biennium's cost, with not a lot of increase anticipated, hoping that, how high can it go? But Leslie and I are going to be meeting with the court budget manager and trying to dig into all of the details. It's a complicated contract, very similar to the police contract in the way that they spread their costs and their staff and their overhead for their buildings and the judges and allocate that out to their contract cities. And I don't think there's any big ahas in there, but it's just a very expensive operation. And our fines, if judges don't assess fines, if fines aren't collected, and I know that there's a big account receivable backlog of fines, then we don't get the revenue to cover those costs, and it's kind of a dilemma.
We had Judge Anderson come speak to you a few weeks ago, and she talked about a recent Supreme Court case that talks about the inability for judges to assess fines on people who are struggling financially. And Judge Anderson in particular has been applying that court case and has been less inclined to charge misdemeanors with additional fines and fees. For example, reimbursements for court and jail costs and things like that that you can tack on to fines. So things like that have been working against us in being able to recover revenues, which affects the net subsidy we give to the court.
So I'm just looking at public safety and what was budgeted. I mean, we're looking at what, 8.8 million? And our property tax is only 4.7?
So that first number is a biennial number.
Right, I understand.
And the second number is an annual number.
Okay. But it's still, it's a pretty large percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And
so they're coming.
I mean,
to be,
how sustainable is this over time?
Yeah, there's a graph in the city manager's budget message that talks about that. In just a few years, at this current trend, public safety expenditures are going to overtake property tax revenue.
Yeah. So, I mean, are we looking? I mean, we had a big report done a couple of years ago on police and contract and everything. Are we looking down the road and trying to anticipate some of this? I mean, I'm sure we are, but are we utilizing that report? Are we?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is that last report was pretty, the council looked at it and said, Lake Forest Park was the only city that was interested in looking at attempting a contract with the city, and it was going to save Lake Forest Park twice as much as it was going to save the city of Kenmore.
Right. And
I think it was pretty clear what was going on there. So, Kirkland's got that big annexation. Their jail is struggling. That's why we're not contracting with their jails, because they don't have enough FTEs right now to run their jail for anything outside their city. Bothell is pretty large, so you can certainly ask those cities again if they're interested in looking at contracting. But I don't think you're going to find for the police contract much of a better deal than what you're getting with the county. A lot of these other charges are prosecutor, courts, jail.
Right.
Those are just charges that you're kind of stuck with unless you can find somebody doing a lot cheaper, which I haven't been able to find. The jail, Snohomish County Jail originally came back this last year and said, hey, we're interested in opening up contract negotiations with you again. I said, great. And then they said, oh, by the way, we're not going to offer you video conferencing for your first appearance, which was a deal breaker for us, because without the video conferencing, we would have to take an officer. Every time we book somebody in jail, we'd have to take an officer the next day to go pick that person up, bring them back to court, and then take them back to jail, which is just too cost prohibitive. So, I mean, we've always looked at the ways of saving, but, I mean, that's up to the council as to what they want to do for the police contract and if they want to look elsewhere.
When it comes to jail, some years ago, the city of Kenmore and several other cities looked at a North End regional jail. I believe it was, which city manager did that? I forgot. Was it Steve Anderson?
Steve Anderson.
Yeah.
Was in on that, yes.
Yeah, and I think that kind of didn't go anywhere, mainly because of where would you put it. But the south end of King County did a regional jail called SCORE, and that's the jail we use. We send our misdemeanors all the way down to south end of King County. But should we be looking at a north end jail? Because the trend is for all those jails just to keep filling up.
Right. And I was on that committee a number of years ago where we looked at that. Mm-hmm. And that's when South County decided to go, and then there was talk up here, and then it was going to go over at some school site, I think in Shoreline, by the Shoreline Lake Forest Park border, was where they were talking about putting it. But that's with what we're having to do with transporting prisoners and everything. It may be something that we should look at again.
Yeah. What about Lake Point? Do you think we?
That's the problem. Nobody wants a jail in their city.
think we talked Redmond into it. Councilmember Herbig.
Just a quick question. How many, on average, how many people do we have in jail any given evening?
Well, we contract for 12 daily bed rate of 12. We can have up to 16 people a day in jail. It's kind of a fluid process, but so we contract for 12 guaranteed beds a day.
Thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
So we pay for 12 whether we've arrested 12 people?
Well, we do the guaranteed bed rate, which allows us to always have a bed available regardless of how many people we have in jail. Okay. So they have the guaranteed bed rate, or they have kind of first come, first serve. And we did the guaranteed bed rate's like $108 a day, and the first come, first serve is like $160 a day. So you're saving money by guaranteeing that 12 bed rate. And we've always met that. That's kind of a low number. Our actual population is a little higher than that.
Didn't we used to use Snohomish County?
Yep.
For a while?
We did, and then they had a lot of in-custody deaths up there, and they started having a lot of investigations, and they decided that they were going to cancel all their contracts because they just were overwhelmed with too many people, too many inmates, and so they canceled all the out-of-county contracts first, and then I think they canceled a lot of their in-county contracts also. And they just have not been very interested in coming back. Okay. Contracting again, like I say, they did say they were interested, but they wouldn't. We had video conferencing with them before, so I can't understand why they don't have it now.
So weird.
Yeah, so I think it was just maybe their way of saying they're not real interested.
So we're paying $664 a day for jail? Good, because of our contract?
How much now? Well, it's $108. $108 to book somebody in
by
daily.
6, yeah, so it's 12.
Yeah, and King County is like $275 booking fee and a couple $100 a day maintenance or whatever. It's really outrageous.
And we still have to use King County from time to time.
Right, and yeah, and so SCORE does not have
work release.
Work release. Okay. And the county does. So if a judge orders somebody to do work release, then we have to transfer that inmate from SCORE and put them in King County and pay the higher rate for the work release.
Oh, wow.
So have city managers talked about looking at a north?
No. Not since I've been here, no. But Kirkland's satisfied because they have a new jail now, so that takes them out of the mix. And Lake Forest Park, what are they doing? I forgot. Are they going to Snohomish?
Lake Forest Park has, I think they have a contract with maybe Linwood and maybe Snohomish County.
Yeah,
a couple.
yeah. So.
In Redmond, they don't have a jail, do they? Redmond?
No.
Waffle doesn't either.
And Issaquah?
Issaquah has their own jail.
They have their own?
They do.
One more thing on court. If court continues to go up like it has been, then at some point it's going to be worth it to be looking at other options on court.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
One thought is to talk to Shoreline about a combined Kenmore Shoreline Municipal Court. That's basically what's happening now, except for it's run by the county. So we'll keep an eye on it and may consider that. There are folks out there that are really good at doing that kind of analysis and telling you whether it's worth it or not. So,
thank you. Anything else?
Well, just to that point, I think the looking at the contract that we have with them and what costs are actually getting passed on is going to be really interesting to see what the opportunities might be there for saving on court costs.
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing that.
I'm still a big fan of contracting out court and not having your own municipal court. My last city had a municipal court and lots of headaches, and it wasn't a moneymaker. It was subsidized as well. So.
Yeah, and the 271, I mean, I forget sometimes that, yes, that's 2 years, so it's $135,000 a year net. I really think there's something on the revenue side that is really distorting the picture, though. So, all right. Well, thank you. We'll move to development services.
Pardon?
All right. All right, thanks a lot. The Development Services Department is responsible for the oversight of the development throughout the city, and this consists of permitting for new construction or tenant improvements, changes to existing buildings, and this includes the inspection portion of it too. We also are responsible for the code enforcement program in the city. The total 2017-18 budget is $2,071,289. This is a 26% increase over the 15-16 budget. 20% of this is personnel, and 6% is services. As Joanne mentioned earlier, with the services, there's a pass-through reimbursement services that are new to this year, which include the Lake Point consultants and other consultants, and also the credit card fee that will get charged to our department next year. The current level of FTEs is 5.5, and we are proposing to add a new temporary building inspector and plans examiner, and this is where the other increase is over the 2015-16 biennial budget. The development activities in the city are, as Joanne mentioned earlier with her report, we're expecting development revenue to drop off, but we're still expecting a high number of permit. It's just going to be less revenue for the city, mainly because of the larger projects aren't anticipated. So currently, right now, we don't have any big projects anticipated or in the actual pipeline. We do, as much as possible, try to continue to exceed our customers' expectations by providing excellent customer service in a timely manner. As Rob mentioned earlier, some of our time reviews are slipping, but we're still trying to meet at least the expectations of the customer. So up front, we're just letting the customers know about how long times take to get stuff done. And so far, we're not getting a lot of pushback. It's understood. They understand what's going on. So, like I said, we're just meeting. We're just letting the customer know what's expected and trying to meet that expectation of them. In 2017-18, Lake Point is going to be ramping up and requiring a lot more resources, and so we're anticipating, them coming in for permits such as the site plan applications and shoreline applications, development agreements. So these are going to take a lot of staff resources and time, but we haven't budgeted any FTEs for this project. If it is anticipated, we can regroup and find out exactly what we're going to need to provide to provide services for the Lake Point project. And it's early next year, and I anticipate the certificates of occupancies for the Kenmore Village projects, the Spencer 68, the Link Building, the Town Green or Town Square buildings will be coming to an end. So we'll be issuing the certificate of occupancies for all those buildings, except for a couple buildings that aren't yet permitted in the Kenmore Village. We continue to process land. So we're going to continue to process the St. Edward Seminary rehabilitation permits. So we anticipate that the environmental review will be completed this year, and next year we're going to dive into the site plan review and construction permits for that project.
Councilmember Curtis.
Seems like I've heard credit cards mentioned a couple times. I don't understand credit cards at all, how that relates to anybody's business.
The bill, we don't take credit cards over the counter right now, but on mybuildingpermit.com, if a application is processed there, a credit card can be used. And some of those transactions are very large. And so the city then has to pay the bank the credit card fee, processing fee, which is roughly 3% of the transaction. And those have been, especially with the development that's been going on, becoming a significant expenditure. Not too long ago, a couple years maybe, there was a change at the state level that allowed cities to now pass those fees back to the consumer. We weren't able to do that in the past, and now we can. And because of that, we are including a credit card processing fee in the fee resolution so that we can offset those charges. I mean, they've really been mounting up.
Okay, thank you.
And with the implementation of the new financial software, even though we don't process a lot of transactions over the counter, we will be able to institute a credit card transaction.
I guess that's it.
That's it for tonight.
So on everything that's gone over, we've pretty much got our questions answered, right? If we don't, please address them to the city manager, because we're moving on to other stuff next week.
If there are questions based on tonight's presentation that come up over the course of the week, just send those to us. We'll bring them back for the full council's review. Because next week on November 14th, we'll be diving into the budgets for most of the public works related departments and funds, including surface water. So the list is on your screen. So that'll be a busy night. But if there's any questions from tonight or even preceding next week, let us know as soon as possible so we can get those answers for you.
Deputy Mayor's got a question here.
Yeah, back to City Council. FTE means full-time equivalent, full-time employee. What does it mean?
It does, full-time equivalent.
Are each one of us full-time equivalents?
No, you are not. But
Okay.
we like to think of you that way.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sure you probably put in enough hours to be a full-time equivalent, but
Yeah.
technically
We're
that's a
part-timers,
40-hour-a-week person.
Given your pay and the hourly rate that comes out to, I actually call you guys volunteers.
That's more appropriate.
Gotta raise the minimum wage here in Kenmore.
That's a really good question.
15 cents an hour. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is adopt resolution number 16-281, the City of Kenmore, for 2017 fee schedule. Mr. Hampson.
Oh, thank you.
Development Services Director.
So it's that time again. We typically adopt the fee resolutions annually around September, October. In this case, we're a little bit later in November, but here we are. So there are 8 proposed changes in the 2017 fee schedule, which I was going to go over really quickly. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to jump in at any time or ask me at the end. So the first change would be to revise the housing code enforcement appeal fee to be consistent throughout. There were some confusions about what fee actually applies to the appeals, and so we just made them straight across the board, the same fee of $125. The second one was to increase the technology fee from 3% to 5%. This is the fee that it gets applied to development permits, and it's a fee that gets passed through partially to mybuildingpermit.com, which mybuildingpermit.com is our online permit portal, which those fees are getting increased from them this year. Number third was to revise the site plan application to be based on a valuation. This is really important for larger projects because currently there's just a flat rate of $368 regardless of the size of the project. So take into consideration projects such as Kenmore Village or Spencer 68, all the time that we spent on doing the site plan review to recoup $368. Similarly, the St. Edward Lodge project. Number 4 has added the wireless communications fees that were based on the ordinance that was passed earlier this year by council on October 10th. So now we just have fees that align with the codes that were in place. And the fees that we put in there for the communication facilities are the same fees that would apply to other land use applications, such as a conditional use permit. So we try to keep the fees the same as we would find them in other places of the code, but just to be more specific on communication facilities. Number 5 was to revise transportation impact fees. That was already adopted by council on May 9th, 2016. So this just formally puts them into the fee resolution. Number 6 was added a fee for violating work hours allowed in the right-of-way by franchise right-of-way permits. And so a lot of times the franchises have contractors who work in our right-of-way and they're violating the work hours, and Public Works is having a difficult time penalizing them. So this would be actually a penalty for the companies that are working in their right-of-way. Number 7 has added a new credit. Oh, this is the credit card service fee that we were just talking about, to have a pass-through fee so people can use credit cards. And so, like Joanne was talking about, we currently have a way to allow credit cards on mybuildingpermit.com. Right now, it's capped at a value at $10,000. I do believe, and this would lift that restriction, add the additional fee, and when we get our financial software system implemented in the city, we'll be able to accept credit cards at the counter. And so until that's done, we won't be able to accept credit cards at the counter, but we'll at least have that fee in place when we have the program up and going to do that. And finally was to take a look at all the public records requests and the copies that are in our code, and just update them based on actual costs and new technology and termination.
Questions? Councilmember Spurrier.
Brian, so the new credit card service fee, is that in addition to the tech fee?
It is.
So is it like 3%?
3%.
So you're saying that basically a person could pay 8% more if they use mybuildingpermit.com?
No, regardless if they use mybuildingpermit.com, the tech fee is applied to development services fees. And only if they use their credit card, they're going to be assessed the credit card fee. We get charged from mybuildingpermit.com based on our development revenue, regardless if they use the website portal or not.
I appreciate that clarification, because I was thinking, okay, if I have a big project and it's going to cost me 8% more to apply online, I'm not going to do that, you know. And so I was just hoping we weren't creating more work for the development services by the fees. So it sounds like that's not the case, though.
I don't think it's the case. And also, we're getting a lot of support from Master Builders Association and other developers for providing this service, the mybuildingpermit.com services, to be specific, because it's similar across all the jurisdictions that use it.
Any other questions? So I've had a few people who do repair work in the city and whatever have commented to me how inexpensive our fees are. Have we done a comparison?
We're currently in the process of taking a look at our development review fees, and I was hoping to have that all as part of the 2017-18 biennial budget and the 2017 fee resolution, but I wasn't able to do that. So I plan on having something come back to you after the first of the year or early next year sometime. But we are taking a look at all of our development review fees based on the services that we provide. We're going to compare them to nearby jurisdictions. And so there's actually two parts of the fees that we collect. One is per unit fee, and one is per valuation fee. And so, for example, when we're taking any fees for single-family residents, I'll just use that one because that's we do a lot of new single-family residential construction. It's based on the valuation of the project, and those fees are really comparable to other cities' methods of doing it, and we recoup a lot of our expenditures through that fee. However, the unit fees that we charge are really low, and so, for example, a re-roof fee is really low for the services that we provide if we go out 2 or 3 times, and including counter time. It doesn't cover the cost. But right now, we're just taking a look at the overall review fees and comparing them overall across the board. How do those shake out? And so we haven't yet have that analysis completed and ready to present to you.
Yeah, I was commenting. People were commenting to me on the re-roof, on water heaters, on furnaces, on things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? All right, so I guess we're looking for a motion to approve these fees, this 2017 fee schedule.
So moved.
Page. So we're looking to approve resolution number 16-281. Motion was made. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
7-0.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So next item on the agenda then is staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have too much tonight. No one-on-ones with this week, if that's okay with you all. But of course, no, I do not want them. But if you want them, then I want them. So please know that I'll meet with you this week if you need to meet with me. There's Veterans Day this week on Friday, so City Hall will be closed. And also on Wednesday, Debbie Bent and I are going down to Tumwater to Washington State Parks headquarters to hopefully negotiate and nail down the major final deal points for the ball field lease agreement. So we're really hopeful for that because the Parks Commission plans on bringing a report to the Parks Commission staff plan on bringing a report to the Parks Commission at their November 16th study session meeting. Also, the budget that you saw tonight and that's been presented to you assumes that Proposition 1 walkways and waterways passes. And I think it's also been explained to you that if it passes, we need to move quickly on getting a bond rating and getting the ordinance in front of you. In fact, we're going to have a draft bond ordinance for you to look at a week from tonight. Is that right, Joanne? Yeah. And then that'll be what we call a first reading, and then second reading and adoption, again, if the proposition passes, would be on November 21st. So things need to happen that quickly. In fact, Joanne and I have plane tickets booked to make a bond rating presentation to Standard & Poor's in San Francisco on November 15th and 16th. So it's all moving that quickly. Last but not least, thank you for allowing me to show up late to the meeting tonight. I was at my son's end of the season cross-country banquet, and he got some recognition. Can I share it with you? It's just giving me a minute to brag a little bit. So he was the only boy on his team to qualify for state, which was last weekend in Pasco. So he ran at state and finished in the top 25% of 4A boys runners, so that was fun to watch him.
Becca Ledsham was also the only girl from Inglemoor to qualify for state, and she made it onto the podium. She placed 16th. The best we've done with girls in recent memory is Amber Rose, Katrina Rose's daughter, took second in state just a couple of years ago, so that was pretty cool. But anyway, so Ethan got some fun recognition. He got Scholar Athlete Award. He was the only boy to get that, and you have to be a 3-year runner and have a GPA over 3.8. So he got that. He and several girls got that award tonight. And he got what they call the Viking Hammer Award, which is Most Valuable Player Award. And his teammates, hold on here, his teammates gave him the Most Likely to Have a Man Bun and Be Teaching a Jiu-Jitsu Class on Top of a Mountain Award. And so, where's the fun? That cross-country team, they've got that down pat. They had a blast tonight with all their fun little things they did. So that's all I have.
Wonderful. Comments? Initiative reports. Councilmember Smith.
No, I don't have anything to add, thanks.
Councilmember Sperry.
Well, I just wanted to, I know the hour is late, but I just wanted to comment on the presentation of the budget that, first of all, I know this represents so much work. And the quality of the document and the clarity of what all this public money and resources is going towards, what the accomplishments are, I think it's at a whole nother level. And so I've really appreciated going through it, and I haven't got all the way through it, but I really appreciate that. And then the other part is the fact that we have fun on our budget. And not only, is it not just an inside joke, my daughter, who's in her 20s, without mom saying anything, right, saw this laying on my table and laughed out loud. She thought it was so good. So it translates outside of council humor. So we are definitely having fun.
Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Herbig. Nothing to add. Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing to add.
Deputy Mayor.
Seahawks 31-25.
So I think a number of you know that I was involved in the Seattle-King County Health Clinic, which is a great experience, and we helped a lot of people. And basically, to give you any idea how many people we helped, let me get to the right report here. There was 4,492 patients seen, and volunteers were 4,258 total. So, if somebody volunteered 3 days, they were counted 3 times. So, but the value of services that was given is an astounding $3,341,000 worth of services we're giving. So people who came in for dental work, last year there was, I think, 80 chairs on the floor. This year there was 120 chairs on the floor. So they were pulling teeth, they were making dentures, they were doing all sorts of things. It was truly amazing. Then general medical, and then they also did vision. And everybody, after they finished all of their appointments, got a free pair of shoes. So, and from Brooks. So, anyway, it was a huge success. It's the 3rd year they've done it, and I'm just hoping that they continue this because it was really valuable, worthwhile. And I worked midnight till 8 in the morning, and so you see the people coming in and lining up, and there's a lot of need there, and it's really good to see. Little housekeeping note. We're falling in the tendency when an email goes out, we do reply all. Please don't do that. We're going to get in serious trouble with the PDC if we do reply all. And so it's just better if we don't. Just reply to the person that wrote the email. It's just not good practice. I've been appointed to the alignment team and assisting in the development of the North Shore School District's new strategic plan. So, yeah, and with that, oh yes, we do have an executive session. We are going to adjourn to executive session for 25 minutes, yes. Pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101, subsection I, potential litigation. And there will possibly be action relating to the executive session. So 25 minutes? Yes, we can take 5.
Oh, standing, that feels nice.
What's that like?
It's when I reach hour 3 of sitting.
Oral surgery over. I go to Dean's.
I do the fall back, but like